I wanted to talk about chargebacks and fraud. Last year I looked up this statistic. Last year in 2023, small business owners got defrauded, $1.8 billion in chargebacks, stolen credit cards, all that kind of stuff. So I'd love to share my experience, try to help you not have to go through it, and also get your feedback on how we could have avoided it. So,
tell me. I don't know that I've heard this story from you before.
Yeah. So
what happened?
Yeah. This was a number of years ago. Normally, I wouldn't take a credit card for $58,000. I just wouldn't do it. It'd be like, hey, look, you got to do a wire transfer. That kind of thing. But
I've done it too. Like, a corporate client or whatever.
Yeah.
I want the money in house.
I do too.
So
that was my first mistake.
Willing to pay the 3%, like all of those things. Yep.
Yeah. And this was a trusted customer. Somebody that purchased like over $1 million worth of product for me and wanted to pay card. And I said, okay. He's like, yeah, I got to, kind of balance this out. I said, all right, I'll do it. And I'm pretty sure he even paid the fees. So I was like, all right.
Okay. Yeah.
And so this guy we did the charge. We shipped the product. And I think maybe about 3 weeks later, maybe even 4 weeks later, I got an email and the subject was, Shannon, I can't pay for these laptops. And I just looked at that. I said, what? I don't understand. You've already paid.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. So then I opened it up and there was a long sob story about, cash flow this, cash flow. It didn't, the guy never called me or anything. Oh. And I quickly look in the bank, and it's like, okay, well, maybe how can I deal with this? And sure enough, the funds had already been deducted. And, typically back then when the bank, the merchant processor, they would send you a letter.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, this chargeback's been initiated. We've deducted the funds from your account. Would you like to dispute it? You could try to dispute it. And so it was devastating, as you can imagine. And so tried to, get this guy on the phone, wouldn't take my calls. It was just brutal. And he basically said, hey, I'm in trouble. He kept emailing me back. I can't make this payment. My cash flows and this. And so I've had to do the chargeback. And so I called the bank, called the merchant processor. Listen, man, I said, I don't have the laptops. This guy hasn't returned anything. Yeah. I haven't heard that there's any problems. And, the merchant services are really not on your side, surprisingly.
No. I have had them fall. I've had a few of these chargeback things over the years.
Yeah.
I've had, some of those go my way, but most of the time, even if I feel like you in this scenario, you were 100, you didn't do anything wrong. There was
correct.
And there was no return if you have post-purchase blues clause in there, right?
No. Yeah. So that's what I want to try to figure out too. Is I had some ideas in this post to how we could have avoided it.
Did you wind up getting the money or the laptops back?
Kind of.
Okay.
After this guy told the merchant processor, hey, the laptops are defective. Okay. I said, great. I'll send a truck. We'll come pick them up like today. He says, oh, I can't do that because they're with my customer. So not only did he need my money, but he needed his customer's money too.
Oh.
So that's where I really raised a stink. And I said, this guy doesn't even have the product. Oh, I'm going to get it back. So all of it was this kind of gambit to bide his time.
Yeah.
While his cash flow,
he was floating. He was using you and others to float his cash flow.
The crazy thing, if he'd have called me and asked me to borrow $58,000, I probably just would have let him borrow it. I mean,
if he was that good of a customer, sure.
He was a great customer, and I knew him. I'd been out to his place and all this kind of stuff, but he didn't go that way.
But there's a lesson right there. Like, we always talk about how, networking is important. It's one of the reasons we go to like conferences and those sorts of things. This guy had already won that game. Like he had already networked with you to the point where you would have helped him in some way if he had only asked for help.
Should have.
We just said it before. How can we help you? How can I help you? We actually mean it when we throw that question out there.
Absolutely. Because if he would have called me after the purchase or whatever, I could have worked with him and said, okay, I tell you what, how much do you need? Let's figure it out. Let me give you back some of this. Let's, we'll pay it off. I mean, there's ways to make it work. I didn't want to lose him as my customer.
Right.
And he, I know, did not want to lose me as a supplier, which that's what happened. We couldn't continue the relationship. I did eventually get back some laptops. We had to go fight back and forth because a lot of them didn't match what I'd sold him. This guy eventually went out of business. And
I'm not surprised to hear that. Yeah.
He was a great guy. And I realized that, okay, so now doing this postmortem, where did I screw up? Number one, I never took a credit card payment for anything that big. Anything over 10 grand, we just, this is, forget it. Take it or leave it. Number two, I think I put up in here. So I created this form that I required them to sign in anything, even like 10 grand. And it was so
punitive.
It caused a lot of friction.
Yes.
Right? And the purpose of it wasn't really even to get them to sign it and initial everything. The purpose was to get them to just send a wire transfer.
Right.
It's like, okay, if you have to use a credit card, you have to go through this, 5-page form, initial everything, sign here over and over and over, and agree that this is, and even though I don't know whether I could have enforced it, it worked pretty well. It got, most people said, we can't sign this thing. And I said, okay, send me a wire transfer.
That's okay. Just send me a wire transfer.
Yeah, just send me a wire.
Right.
And, I've had a lot of responses on this post that, people had created funnels on the website with check boxes that you must agree to this. And,
this
and
a lot of that can be used for the purpose you did to create friction. But the other way that can work is if you essentially make the person agree that they are responsible for this, 5 times before they actually charge the card, in their head, they have committed to you, right? This isn't just, here's my credit card and I might just pull it later. It's fine. This is now, wait a minute. I've put my word on the line 5 times. Like, people generally, I mean, there's sociopaths out there and whatever, but generally people will not walk back on their word.
That's right.
As easily as they would just if there was no personal guarantee, that they had made.
And I don't think it's something you can. This is like a business to business solution, not to consumers, because they're never going to do that.
No,
if you go.
This is B2B. That's fair.
B2B.
Yeah,
and so, it's just and we recovered. We dealt with it and moved on. And didn't dwell on it, but we did change procedures, and ultimately it was my fault. I wanted the cash quick. I wanted to make the sale. I don't recall if it was the end of the month, end of the quarter, or whatever, but I get those dollar signs in my head, and I start thinking, man, a $58,000 sale right now is going to put us over the top. And I'm sure of it, even though this was a number of years ago. I'm sure I was the driving force behind taking the credit card.
But you can't. I mean, there are going to be those moments where that driving force creates a scenario that you would prefer to have avoided.
Yes.
But that driving force is also what kept you in business after this happened to you, right?
It's a balance. Yeah.
It's a balance. You take it and you're like, okay, I got ahead of myself on that one. But it is good to postmortem it and say, okay, what would I do differently? And in this scenario, you realized, okay, well, I would probably create this friction. You know darn well that this sale, that wasn't a sale in the end, would not have happened if you forced this guy to do a wire transfer.
Correct. Yeah, he didn't have the money.
No.
Clearly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's true. And so, it's just, you got to be super careful now. Fraud is crazy. I'm reading about like some of this AI phishing voice things coming up, and you just got to be diligent. We've been burned back in the day. We used to do COD shipments, and we've been burned with, get this, they were real traveler's checks, but because they were stolen, we got, they sucked the money out of our account. It was a tough one. We eventually got FedEx to reimburse us because
I was going to say, because they're the ones that collected
they did
the payment.
the transaction and they paid it and all this kind of stuff. And so, but I would love to hear what you've done with your business to combat fraud. How do you deal with this stuff? What did I do wrong? Tell me, help us learn more, and so we don't get scammed out of the cash that we work so hard to make.